Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. We've got a busy show today, and one of our topics has to do with President Obama's new Clean Power Plan. It's really a bad deal for the American people. And we're going to find out why from Dan Kish, who is with the Institute of Energy Research. I've been reading a lot of things out of that organization lately, and we need to watch out for this new Clean Power Plan. It's going to cost us a bundle. And then Donald Trump, of course, running for the White House, freely admits that he has given lots of money to Democrats, including Hillary Clinton. He really helped put Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid into positions of leadership. And so is that a problem now that he's running on the Republican side to try to get the nomination for president? We're going to speak with David McIntosh. He is president of Club for Growth a little bit later on that issue. And then in the second hour, we're kind of going to talk about the issue that I think faces many believers, and that is sharing your faith. Do you ever wish for ways that could be more relevant to another person to help them pay attention so that you could share Jesus Christ with them? Well, we've got some innovative DVDs and a program called Awaken, and Rob Peabody will join us to talk about this, and we'll take your calls. We will welcome your telephone calls throughout the program, but especially during that segment, we will want to hear from you. This just in, I read it on Breitbart just before the program, and it's a new development with regard to one of the stores that probably many of you shop in. I know I do. Target stores. The article says that they are eliminating gender-specific labels and colors for kids' toys. This is amazing to me. The Target department store chain has announced that it intends to go gender neutral in its stores by eliminating the colors blue and pink in displays and signage, and getting rid of the words boys and girls on clothing and toys wherever possible. This is so interesting because I have had lots of children and babies to buy for this summer, friends having babies and shower gifts and things like that. And I've used Target a lot. And I've noticed very attractive children's clothing. Of course, their toys. They've got tons of nursery items. But here in a statement posted to the corporation's website, Target insisted that it puts a lot of thought into how things are organized in its stores. And that's probably true, many of you that shop there, and that the corporation is listening to customers who want a change. Over the past year, this is the statement from Target. Over the past year, guests have raised important questions about a handful of signs in our stores that offer product suggestions based on gender. So the company is now moving to reflect what it claims customers have said. Here's what the statement says from Target. We heard you, and we agree. Right now, our teams are working across the store to identify areas, these are those offensive areas, ladies and gentlemen, where we can phase out gender-based signage to help strike a better balance. For example, in the kids' bedding area, signs will no longer feature suggestions for boys or girls, just kids. In the toys aisles, we'll also remove reference to gender, including the use of pink, blue, yellow, or green paper on the back walls of our shelves. I guess yellow must be more for girls, green for boys. They're going to phase that out. You'll see these changes start to happen over the next few months. Rachel Simmons, who is a gender activist, she's also co-founder of the Girls Leadership It's a group called the Girls Leadership, and she claims that Target's move is a huge deal. Apparently, she's one of the ones that pushed this. It's a huge deal that Target is going gender neutral, she says, because Target is a trendsetter. Retailers have an incredible opportunity here. They're opening up a whole new world of possibility for these kids. What is that possibility? It might be the two pictures that we see on the front of the Breitbart article of girls. And it shows pictures of girls wearing jeans and just T-shirts and sneakers. So they're kind of clothes that boys and girls can wear. And it shows them holding Legos and building sets. So, yeah, girls can enjoy those too. But does that mean that now Target will not label anything for boys or for girls? I guess that's what it means. Not everyone is appreciative of Target's politically correct campaign. Ohio mother Abby Bechtel recently made a splash on social media. I guess this story isn't as new as I thought it was. It's the first I've heard of it. Anyway, she put out a tweet pleading for Target to abandon its effort to bow to the gay lobby. Sets. So I guess there are boys building sets and there are girls building sets, but Target won't be labeling anything, of course. Along with the photo, Bechtel said, "Don't do this, Target." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess Target is joining. It doesn't really sound as much like the gay lobby as it sounds like the transgender lobby. And of course, we cannot label children boys or girls or encourage them in one direction too young, according to some of these activists. It's just amazing to me that this is now hitting a store like Target. Do they not want to make a profit? I mean, folks, we're going to take your calls on this a little bit later in the program. We actually have another guest coming in in the next segment, but I want you to start teeing up and thinking about your phone calls on this, because we will take them. We'll take them here in the first 30 minutes of the program, at least after the bottom of the hour. We will. We want to hear what you have to say about an agenda and, a very successful store that caters to families to now say that they're not going to label things for boys and for girls. I'm starting to wonder whether they're going to change their merchandise also, because I know that a lot of people appreciate the kids' clothes for boys and the kids' clothes for girls. I'm excited about buying clothes that are gender neutral for kids. I like the fact that there's a little boy or a little girl that might dress according to their gender. What do you think? Well, again, we'll tee up your calls, 800-351-1212. I probably won't take a lot of calls right away because we do have a guest coming on. And I do want to talk a little bit about this before he does come in, because, a clean world is something that we all aspire to. And this clean power plan, again, the left tends to have very good names for things that actually can be very bad. And so this has been an agenda that has been percolating in the Obama administration ever since the president took power. And now that he's in his last couple of years and has accomplished so many of the left's goals, this is one that is left. He has not been able to organize our economy according to the environment, which is another way of centralizing our economy. But that's what they're about right now, and that's what this really is about. We're going to talk about some of the specifics. How much is this really going to cost the average American family? They tell us as they present these plans for the environment that it's going to reduce energy costs, but it's going to destroy coal and fossil fuels. That's the goal. The goal is to move toward cleaner power sources, but unfortunately, there are sources like wind and solar that don't yet pay for themselves. They'll be forcing that on us, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to talk about what it will really cost you and what talk about Obama's Clean Power Plan and also about Target. 800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, a few months ago, I did a commentary on the decision by Dan Price, the founder of Gravity Payments, to pay everyone in his company at least $70,000. You might remember that he did it because he had read that how some extra money for some people makes a big difference. Therefore, he decided to cut his $1 million salary to $70,000 and make that amount the minimum wage for the company. At the time, I predicted that it would be hard for him to attract other managers, since people with executive experience can make much more than $70,000. Since then, we have found that his decision created some other problems. 2 of his most valued employees quit because they thought it was unfair to double the pay of some new hires, while the longest-serving staff members got small or no raises at all. In fact, one of them actually helped Dan Price calculate how to raise everyone's salary to $70,000. But over time, she saw how unfair it was given that she was putting in long hours that left little time for her husband and extended family. So when she went to talk to Price, she said, "He treated me as if I was being selfish and only thinking about myself." Now, the publicity about his payment decision also generated lots of publicity and some new business. Price had to hire new people to handle that unexpected reaction and won't see the return on that investment for some time. In less than 2 weeks after the announcement, Price's older brother and Gravity co-founder filed a lawsuit that now threatens the company's existence. With the legal bills piling up and Price's paycheck being used for salary increases, he said, "We don't have a margin of error to pay those legal fees." You know, establishing a minimum wage of $70,000 in the company might have seemed like a good idea, but now Dan Price and Gravity Payments are struggling to deal with the consequences of his decision. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus documentary, now available on DVD and online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and before I bring in our guest, and we're going to talk about the Obama Clean Power Plan, I just want to take a call on the topic that I introduced in the first segment, and to let you know that we will continue to take calls throughout the program on this issue, also included in our subject matter today, because I think it's important. Let's go to Brenda. It's the idea of Target sort of gender neutralizing its kids displays and products. Let's go to Brendan in the state of Georgia. Brendan, what's your comment on this?
My comment is that Target's gender state towards the non-gender is not right, because it's going to cause a lot of conflict between how we raise our children in the Christian-based environment. You know, it's okay for the atheists and all the others, but we have to train our girls to be girls and our boys to be boys. And just to say it's okay, it's like saying it's okay. You know, it's not okay. That's not good. And I think they will lose sales related to this.
Good comment, and I think you're right. I mean, there are some parents who don't want to dress their kids in too frilly or too boyish a manner, but I don't think I think they're in the vast minority. So for a money-making enterprise to make a decision like this, it just shows that there's an agenda at work here, and it's actually outplaying the profit motive in Target. And thank you for that. Thank you for that comment, Brenda.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to let you know that we'll continue to discuss this issue, but I want to move on to our guest, because we've got a distinguished guest with us today on the program. His name is Dan Kish, and he's Senior Vice President for Policy at the Institute for Energy Research. And it's interesting when you talk about the profit motive in regard to Target and a business. And we're also talking about money here, even though the White House claims that its new clean energy plan is going to cost the consumer less. I mean, just a cursory reading of it makes us wonder about that. And this organization, the Institute for Energy Research, has the stats to show what it really will cost us. Dan has more than 25 years of experience on congressional committees, which have been focused principally on natural resource and energy policy. So he's well qualified to speak with us. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Penna, for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I've been reading some of the things that's come out of your organization and others, and I read a lot of Wall Street Journal information on this. And this Clean Power Plan that's been introduced by the Obama administration, there's a new rule. I'll let you explain it. But basically, it requires states to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 32% by 2030, and that's from 2005 levels. And this is going to really close up a lot of coal generating plants. It's going to hurt coal greatly. A lot of people are happy about that. But we need to talk about the real facts and also the reliability of the type of energy that they are pushing. So first of all, explain this rule, because it's a little bit different than what the rule that they had previewed and actually asked people to comment on, isn't it?
It sure is. It's quite a bit different, and that's a bit of a rarity the way things are normally done in Washington. But I guess I should preface by saying they call it the Clean Power Plan, Penna, but this is not about pollution. This is about carbon dioxide, the very stuff that plants live on, the stuff that we exhale, and it ultimately, we couldn't have life on Earth in the absence of carbon dioxide, and this all is part of the president's global warming initiative, which is he's concentrating on in the remaining time he has in office, headed towards an agreement with the UN outside the normal congressional review process that he expects to get in December, much like the Iranian type of decision that he made. So that's what we're talking about. This is global warming. And
so, Dan, let me stop you here for a second,
sure.
Because, you know, in the title of the plan, they don't use the word global warming. They don't use the word climate change. Is that because people don't care that much about that?
Yes. That's because they have done polling. I don't know if people are aware of it, but the White House and its many allies and politicians generally poll things and use focus groups, a very sophisticated, scientific way of approaching things, asking people their opinion about different words and things. And what they found out is that if they call it Clean Power Plan, gee, who's against clean power? Mm-hmm. If they mention carbon dioxide, people's eyes glaze over. If they mention global warming, people start to get a little hot under the collar because it's at the end of the list of things that people are concerned about. There's many people who feel as though the data are beginning to show that they've missed their mark on a lot of the facts related to this and have some serious questions about it. So, hence, they come up with semantics of Clean Power Plan to try to trick people, if you will, into believing that it's something that it's not when it's really global warming.
So we have a sort of a boom lately in natural gas, and in the original rule, there was an emphasis on natural gas use, which is a lot cleaner than coal, for instance. And it's been, you know, good for the economy in one sense, in many senses, to major on this with this whole idea of fracking, even though it can be controversial in some people's minds. But this rule de-emphasizes natural gas too, doesn't it?
It sure does. If the issue is carbon dioxide, natural gas gives off, for the same amount of electricity, it gives off about half the carbon dioxide for the same amount of electricity, and therefore...
Of coal?
Yes,
okay.
Of coal. And therefore, and I should add, I mean, the United States and North America in general is blessed. I mean, God blessed us with these enormous quantities of energy. We were told for decades that we're running out of energy. Far from it. And the natural gas boom, as well as the oil boom, tells us that we're now the largest producer of natural gas and largest oil producer in the world. And there's more plenty more where that came from, literally centuries of supplies. But what the original plan did was concentrate on natural gas to replace coal. Coal is our number one source of electricity, or at least was until earlier this spring when gas surpassed it. It's still a very sizable portion of our production, and the thought was folks were going to be building new plants, tearing down coal plants, building new plants, which in itself is expensive because you have to pay for the plants. Think about driving a car that's already paid for. You may not get as good a gas mileage as a new car, but you know what it means for your budget when you go out and buy a new car. The equivalent logic prevails when you're taking existing plants and replacing them with new ones, whatever the source. But what they did at the last minute with this plan was actually increase the reductions in carbon dioxide, therefore increasing the cost, and de-emphasizing their focus on natural gas and putting that focus instead on renewable energy sources, solar and wind. And they want us to multiply by large numbers the amount of both wind power and solar power that we have to make up for the coal plants that we're reducing. And that is going to provide lots of challenges, both on a cost basis as well as reliability, dependability, and that sort of thing.
All right. Dan Kish is our guest, and we are talking about energy. Dan, there were some cost estimates made when this natural gas rule was out there. Now that the rule emphasizes wind and solar more, don't all the calculations for the cost of energy to the typical family change?
Yes, they're going to go up. Those analyses are being performed now. The government hasn't given us any estimates, and I honestly have learned that the EPA's predictions on this sort of thing are terrible. They're not in the energy business at all, and therefore they're fairly self-serving. They're trying to sell you a product. But the Energy Information Administration, which is an objective agency of the federal government, had estimated costs were going to go up in the double-digit range, in some cases in the, depending on where people are in the United States under the previous plan, by as much as 30-40% over the next 15 years. That's now, those numbers, there's no way those numbers are not going to go up because of what they've done. Taken gas, which is the most affordable alternative to coal, and out of the picture, and put renewables in, and not only do renewables cost more, even though you don't have to pay for fuel, they are also so-called intermittent sources, which means that you have to pay for two things. It's sort of like having to
You've got to have
cars.
a backup plan, don't you?
You got it.
Yeah, okay.
You got it.
Dan Kish is my guest,
pay for
and
that.
we'll take your calls on this issue, also on Target 800-351-1212. Also, please go to the Point of View website. We've got 2 articles on this new carbon rule. One of them is about Germany. What happened there when they tried to do this? Check that out, and we'll be right back.
From PureFlix, the creators of God's Not Dead, comes Do You Believe? On DVD and Blu-ray. 12 unique lives, 12 different stories. One path will bring them all together.
So you believe in Jesus?
Do You Believe? Mira Sorvino, Sean Astin, Alexa Penavega. Do You Believe? On DVD and Blu-ray. Available now. Supporters of abortion are on the run. Several states have pulled their funding from Planned Parenthood, and this is the time to take advantage of the momentum and keep hammering away at the culture of death. Visit pointofview.net. Click on the action alert for the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Video after video has shown the nation and the world what abortion really is. Each new effort defenders of life make right now can multiply the impact. Take just a minute or two right now. Stand up for the unborn. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the action alert for the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And my guest is Dan Kish, Senior Vice President for Policy at the Institute for Energy Research. We're talking about the Obama Clean Power Plan. And this is for carbon dioxide reduction. It's going to destroy coal. It's going to make energy cost more for the American people. And it will have an effect on the entire economy. I think that's part of the point, Dan. First of all, let me, send you to pointofview.net. There's an article there that comes out from Dan's organization, which is the Institute for Energy Research, called EPA's Carbon Rule, Huge Economic Burden for No Climate Benefit. And that's one question I want to ask you is, since that seems to be, even though not overtly the goal of this is to reduce global warming, what does it do for global warming if this was implemented fully?
It's actually laughable, Penna. According to using the EPA's own models, using their own calculations that they use, the impact in the year 2100, 85 years from now, will be less than 2/100ths of a degree Celsius difference from if we continue with our existing programs and don't add these additional burdens. 2/100ths. It's actually closer to 15/1000ths of a degree. So much so that when the president talks about sea level rise or the EPA talks about sea level rise, the sorts of things they're trying to stop, that equates, according again to their own models, of the thickness of 3 pieces of paper. It doesn't do anything for global warming. All it does is drive up electricity costs, make our system more unreliable, put a lot of people who work at making energy here in the United States out of work, and end up importing solar panels from China, where the preponderance of the world's solar panels are made. We're going to give up on American jobs and ship them to China as a consequence of this. I mean, all around, this makes absolutely no sense and does not do what they say they're out to do, which is to slow the warming of the earth if it is indeed warming.
Since it doesn't make economic sense, since it doesn't make family budget sense, what is the point of this? I mean, you mentioned that President Obama wants to go to the UN to do something without the consent of Congress, probably, with international agreements. So, in a sense, do we want to be the world leader on impoverishing the world economy?
Yeah, I mean, that's the conclusion one would draw by the impacts of their own models give you, Penna. I mean, in essence, what they say in response to when this is brought up is, well, we're going there to show an example for other people. We realize we're not the problem in the world, but if we show an example, China and India and other places who are struggling to provide electricity, basic electricity, to the hundreds of millions of people who live in abject poverty around the world. I mean, nothing lifts people up more than having affordable energy sources and allowing them to get away from having to cook over open fires for their dinner and that sort of thing. Those countries are not going to do anything about it, and they've pretty much said so, but they're more than happy to watch the United States reduce its standard of living, I guess, if that's what it is. And so it's largely about appealing to the elites who say, gee, we've got to do something, because it sure doesn't have anything to do with the temperature.
Well, so India, China, and some of these countries that are developing are actually increasing their coal usage because that's the way they increase their energy picture. But other countries have tried this, and I put another piece up at pointofview.net, the Obama-Clinton 1-2 blackout, and this talks about Germany. They've done this in spades, and it's devastating their economy and impoverished millions, this article says, and they call it, well, first of all, as Dan said, this energy is unreliable, but they're also just the cost of energy for the average family is so much higher there. Is that what we want to see here? So that's why, sometimes it's good to learn from other countries that have tried things. I mean, we're looking at China and India and trying to be an example for them to do something that they know would not be good for their economy. But yeah, we don't look at the European countries that have done this and changed themselves, moved more of a big government socialist type of situation. That's really where we're going, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, that ultimately, the thing to remember about this entire plan is, in the past, states have largely been, and local governments have they've looked out for the interests of local people, and they've made these decisions about which way to go forward in conjunction with what makes economic sense. They wouldn't allow you to build a power plant that forced consumers to buy the most expensive kind of power. And that's typically what we've had in the United States. This turns that on its head, takes it all to Washington, and puts the EPA in charge of dictating what kind of power you get, when you get it, how much you're going to pay for it, and who benefits as a result of it. In many cases, it's some of the people who are funding the public relations campaigns for this. There's a lot of money involved in energy here, and some of the folks who say they're just out to save the planet from global warming are actually cashing in on selling the products that the Obama administration wants to force into our system. So in the case of Europe, it's becoming a basket case energy-wise. You mentioned energy poverty. It's not only hitting in Germany, but also in the United Kingdom, where they're rapidly reversing previous policies that drove up the cost of electricity. And if you can imagine taking your electric bill you get and tripling the numbers in it, that's what German families are paying for their electricity compared to ours, 3 times as much, because they're jamming large amounts of renewable energy in. Then they have to pay for the backup. Then they have to subsidize industries that will otherwise move out of their country because they can't afford the electricity to make the products. That costs jobs. In the UK, elderly and people on fixed incomes, the least among their population, are suffering greatly when it gets cold in the winter, and the electricity and the other energy sources are very, very expensive. And so they're having second and third thoughts about whether this makes any sense, while in the United States we're going the already disreputable path that they followed to get into those problems.
Ladies and gentlemen, next week, Kathy Adams is going to come into the studio and join me, and we're going to do a lot more on this issue because she goes to the UN conferences. She's going to the one in Paris in December, and she does not want to. She doesn't want to see what Dan has just told us is going to happen. But we will talk more about it. I want to ask you one more question, Dan, and that's about what can the states do, because the states still have a role to play here in fighting back on this, don't they?
They sure do, Penna, and that's the one bright spot of this whole discussion. The federal government, by seeking so much control at the central level and then trying to coincide or connect their operations to what the United Nations is trying to do, may have awoken a sleeping giant in the states. And so we now have 6 or 7 governors who have told the EPA, we are not going to submit these plans that you tell us we're supposed to submit, that basically make us responsible for these damages that will occur to our economies. Other states are now looking at it in the wake of last week's new proposal. And we have a situation that extracts with what the founders initially thought we should have anyway, which is weak federal government and strong states standing up for the individual interests of their citizens. And they are beginning to exercise that right. So to the extent that people are looking for places to affect those changes, you should be talking to your states, because if they adopt these programs and go along with Washington, we are in deep trouble as a nation and as a people if we want to be that strong bastion of freedom and liberty and that we've always been as a consequence of that dispersed power.
Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be an ongoing issue, so we'll continue to call on you guys to get the facts. We appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you so much, Penn. I'd love to do it. Bye-bye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've got one call that I'd like to take before the break on this, but Liv in Florida, you're going to have to be quick because we only have a minute. Go ahead.
Hello. Hey, yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's slightly exaggerated the impact that the Clean Power Bill will actually have on the country, just because coal plants have been in decline over the last 2 years anyways, as the price of extracting the coal becomes more expensive and the price for selling coal is decreasing. So
yeah,
I don't really think it's
the
gonna
question I have then is, thank you so much, Liv, for your call. Why not let that just happen? Let coal decline gradually. That would not have such a big impact on the economy. There have been lots of money and innovation put into cleaner coal. So is the environment and the actions that we take to deal with the environment are taking place anyway in our free economy. But when it gets forced by the state, that's when you force a disparate economic impact, and that's when you hurt American families. And that's what we want to prevent. We hope the states will stand up against that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, We are going to move on to the topic of Donald Trump for a segment here. So stay with us for more Point of View.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, it's hard to do a radio show without talking about Donald Trump, and so we're going to do that in this segment. And one of the things we've learned about him as we watch his rise, and we watched him in the debates last week, is that he contributes to politicians so they will do things for him. And he's given a lot of money to actually Hillary Clinton, who he would love to be running against. And so we just kind of want to dig into that a little bit. First of all, I guess the best way to do it is to listen to what he said about it in the debate last week.
I will tell you that our system is broken. I give to many people. Before 2 months ago, I was a businessman. I give to everybody. When they call, I give. And you know what? When I need something from them, 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me. And that's a broken system.
So what'd you get from Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I'll tell you what. With Hillary Clinton, I said, be at my wedding, and she came to my wedding. You know why? She had no choice because I gave. I gave to a foundation that, frankly, that foundation is supposed to do good. I didn't know her money would be used on private jets going all over the world. It was. But
revealing. Well, with us to talk about this is David McIntosh, and he is president of Club for Growth, which is the leading advocate for economic liberty. Great organization. He's a former congressman. He represented Indiana's 2nd District in the U.S. Congress from 1995 to 2001. and he is a leader for the principles of limited constitutional government and individual freedom. David, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Dana.
All right. Donald Trump is very honest about why he gives money to politicians, unapologetic about giving to Democrats. And we know that a lot of his giving actually put Nancy Pelosi into the speaker chair and Harry Reid into the position of being Senate Majority Leader. So he's, now running and really catching on with a lot of Americans. What do you make of it?
What I see happening here is in some ways the worst kind of politics, where he views you can just buy people to get what you want, say anything to attract a crowd and an attention. And what we do is look at somebody's record and what they've said they would do in the past and measure it to what they're saying today. And Donald's saying he's a conservative, wants to change Washington, but he ends up being just like the folks in Washington. And his issues, like he's for the single payer. Later in the debate, he said it, Canada works, and that means the government would further take over our health care. If you can't get through on the Obamacare website, wait till you got the Donald Care website, and the whole government is telling you what doctors you can go to and what you can get treated for. And so I think what's happening is he's giving voice to real anger and frustration about Washington not paying attention to what people wanted to do. And, they changed with Obama. They thought it'd get better. They changed with the Republican House and the Republican Senate. They thought it'd get better. But they just are more and more frustrated. And I'm frustrated. And so he's capitalizing and giving voice to that anger and saying it needs to change. But his methods as a businessman and a politician in the past would just be the worst type of politics.
Well, it would. And since you've been in Congress, I think that you're uniquely qualified to be able to talk about this. I think what's happened with Donald Trump is he's struck a chord, but perhaps those supporting him, they're either just kind of biding their time or they're just not educated enough to understand that you need to dig a little deeper for somebody more substantive. So I guess the question is, right now, as you look at all the candidates, and a lot of people have commented what a rich vein there is there of great talent and good thinking, and yet the person getting the attention is Donald Trump. So how do you think, what is the smart way, if you're running for president, to handle the Trump question?
Yeah, it's a tough situation for a very good field of candidates, the best that we've had in a long, long time in the Republican primaries. And they're men and a woman of substance who've accomplished things. They've got something to say and give voice about how they really would change Washington. What we do is look at their records, and we've put out white papers on presidentialwhitepapers.com so voters can go and look at it there. But I think the candidates are going to have to break through and say, look, here's a real serious answer to that problem, rather than a one-liner that is entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, for instance, Eric Erickson this weekend disinvited Donald Trump over the whole flap between him and Megyn Kelly to his Red State Conference. So that was one thing to do. Some people are saying that if a candidate would come out too strongly against Trump, they would disqualify themselves to then be the inheritor of Trump supporters when he flames out. So, perhaps the strategy is not to criticize Trump, but as you just said, to come in with a reasonable answer to the questions and the concerns that Trump raises.
Yeah. Maybe then at the next debate, if he dodges a question about health care, say, he didn't really tell you whether he would still like government health care or not, but let me tell you what I would do. And here's the plan for how to get rid of Obamacare and fix our system.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to recommend to you the Club for Growth, and you can go there by just going to pointofview.net. You'll see the picture of David McIntosh there, and you can click through to their website. But David, give us the information again, because you have a lot of good resources for people. And I think what we need right now is information, and we really need the truth, don't we? Yeah,
no, that's exactly right. And we love it when people come and visit. You can join as a member to get all of the information with no financial commitment. What happens is we send you more information about candidates for Senate and House that we're supporting. But clubforgrowth.org is that site where you can come and join as a member. Or if you're really just interested in these presidential candidates, we've got a microsite, they call it, presidentialwhitepapers.com, and you can go there and click on the picture of each of the candidates, and it then gives a summary of their record. So, for example, Scott Walker, it goes through all of his great accomplishments in Wisconsin in terms of rolling back the mandatory salary increases and bargaining to save money, but also to put more money in the pockets of state employees because they didn't have to pay the unions to do the negotiations. And his hard work and behind that goes to Marco Rubio and talks about his tax plan, or Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. And
what would you say is like the number one issue that should be? I mean, Donald Trump has made immigration, he's put it out there front and center. He says he's the only one that's brought it up, which isn't true. But what would you say, other than, we major on marriage and life and some of the social issues, but you guys major in the economic issues. So what's the number one issue that you're dealing with?
You're right. And it's how do you grow the economy? I love Jeb Bush saying we should have a 4% growth rate, but behind that, you've got to have a better tax structure, lower rates on taxation, reduce the spending, and that's always the hard one. You have to just be determined we're going to cut out the waste and cut out spending and do entitlement reforms. Free trade, Donald's terrible on that. He'd get us into a trade war with China, and they own a big chunk of our national debt. It just would be a disaster. It's not like building a casino with somebody where you can kind of mess with them and then they come to the table and you work with them. And then deregulate energy and energy production, have reasonable environmental laws so you do protect the environment, but you don't shut down whole industries.
All right, let me jump in because we're coming up on a break. David, thank you so much for joining me today, putting some common sense to this. And ladies and gentlemen, go to the website and click through to Club for Growth. You'll find a lot of great information there. That's David McIntosh. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again during this campaign. We'll be right back.
What can you get for $5? In most cases, you can't even get a value meal at a fast food restaurant. But I'll tell you one thing $5 can do. If every listener to Point of View sent just $5 this week, believe it or not, and someone here did the math, Point of View could pay the bills for the next 3 years. That's what the number said. $5, 3 years. That's how many of you there are and how little it takes to keep us going. The problem is, most of our listeners have never contributed. Never. To make up for those who don't, others give large gifts, hundreds, even thousands, or monthly donations of $30, $65, $100. I don't know what you can do, but I encourage you to do what you can today, even if that's $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Thank you for doing your part for Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on, and if for no other reason, to protect caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you for sticking with us for Point of View. We are taking a big turn today in the program. A lot of times we talk about the issues that face us here in the country, and we're going to take this segment and look at the very, very biggest picture and also take it down to the personal level in the lives of human beings. And we have a guest to help us do that. But first, I just want to kind of bring forward the point that, the church in America is always looking at ways to be, quote unquote, relevant, to reach people, and certainly to reach the generation that's just moving into adulthood and beginning their own families and, taking them into the future. And we have been very, very concerned. We look for lots of ways to do that here on Point of View. We're a ministry that's been around for over 40 years. And so we've sort of watched different organizations attempt to do this. And we're bringing to you today one that I think is doing a good job, and it's got some very good ideas about doing it. And I won't even give you the name of it. I just want to introduce you to our guest first and talk about a specific set of videos that I actually watched last night called Intersect, where your story and God's story converge. And that's really what it's all about. When we introduce people to Jesus Christ, and God's story converges. And certainly out of every generation, God calls a church. And he does it by appealing to people where they are. And that's what we're about today. So with me to discuss all of these themes is Rob Peabody. He is the co-founder of, and I'll tell you the organization, it's called Awaken. It's a great name. It's a nonprofit charity that exists to resource the church for action. And in 2011, just to give you a bit of Rob's history, he and his wife, Medea, and their two boys left a position. He was a lead campus pastor of a Texas megachurch. And he joined sort of an effort to pioneer and lead fresh expressions of the church seeking to engage the unreached 20s and 30s in London, Northeast London. Now, this work was commissioned by the International Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention in partnership with the Church of England. So they got together. They went to to London to begin this ministry, and we'll talk kind of about how that evolved. Rob is now missional consultant for multiple church networks in the UK, and he's a member of the speaking team at Spring Harvest and charged with casting vision and leading a new upcoming national UK 18 to 30s conference, which is called The Pursuit. And I guess that has already taken place. But, just to look at Europe, which we see as post-Christian, and see this work taking place, I think will be very interesting. So, Rob, thank you very much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Penna. It's great to be here with you.
Well, I watched your video last night, Intersect, and we will talk about that in a moment. But I kind of want to go to the broader, larger issue right now, and that is reaching the current generation of young adults in a way that targets where they are and meets them with the message of Christ. We have to be, I guess the word is creative, but maybe relevant. But we always have to think about the societal trends that are undergirding their lives when we do that, because you can't use what worked back in the Jesus movement with this group of young people, can we?
Oh no, you're exactly right, and that is. kind of the foundation for everything we do with Awaken. And so over here in London, it's 8 o'clock at night over here now. I'm a little further along than you guys in the day. But I'm,
well, thanks for spending your evening with us.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's a privilege. What I'm finding over here, and sociologists and missiologists in the States, or actually around the world, in the Western world, they say that, Europe and the UK especially is on a trend that's 10 to 15 years ahead of a lot of places in the United States. And over here, you have an entire generation. They call it the lost generation or the missing generation, which is people in their 18 to 30s. And statistically speaking, if you are in your 20s in the UK, there's a 97% chance that you are not a follower of Jesus, and even further, that you may have never even met one in your entire life. So you were talking about complete post-Christian culture where you have to go back multiple generations, 2 generations, in fact, to people's grandparents to find someone over here who has an accurate view of what church really is or what the gospel actually is. And so we're finding that this generation, and then a lot of the generations here in the UK, and increasingly more in the States when I'm back there, they're no longer going to our traditional churches. So the church, the parish system exists here in the UK, and they might see a church, might have had a function at a church that exists as kind of a community hall, but have never really gone to it for a spiritual reason, for a Jesus reason. And so we're finding that what we've got to do is we have to reimagine the Missio Dei, like the sentness of God and of His people. And what does it look like for us to be a missionary in this context and to go speak the language of the people that are never going to step foot inside the walls of a church and really take the church to them because they're not coming to us?
How do you take it to them? I mean, I know you've got this DVD, Intersect, and I guess it's more one-on-one, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And so, with my background of being there in Dallas and working in a Baptist megachurch, I was really good at the programs, and I was really good at event-driven ministry. And it was pretty easy because you could get a lot of people to show up because of that element of subculture Christianity or that pressure that's still there to do something with the church. But over here, there's no social pressure at all. And so you've got to find ways to meet people in a really real way. And so for a lot of our ministry here, you're exactly right. It's all one-to-one. It's relationship-driven. It's much slower. But when it does happen and somebody does turn to Jesus, it's a complete 180. It's a very refreshing thing because you see people completely turning and giving up their old way of life and following along to this new path with Jesus. And so for us, we end up doing a lot of pub ministry, a lot of coffee shop ministry, a lot of stuff in people's houses. We call them missional communities. And really, it's just small communities of Jesus followers who are living radically different than the greater culture that we're a part of.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can find out more about this ministry by going to pointofview.net. You will see Rob Peabody's picture there, and you can also click through to Awaken, and you can find out more about the DVD Intersect, which is really, I think it teaches a lot about the concept that Awaken is following, Rob, and I'll ask you about this after the break, because there are 5 different stories, and so what it really does is it helps you to understand sort of the issues that face people today, and then to kind of target that with the answer. We know what the answers are. If you're a believer, you know that Jesus Christ holds the answers to these, but it's just not intuitive anymore. And in a sense, maybe that's good because, as Rob said, there's some reality to it. It's not just cultural. It's not just surface. This digs deep into the soul and is the real answer. And I remember when I became a believer in my 20s, that's why I became a believer, because suddenly the Lord had identified and dug out some hurts and some places where I was inadequate. And so I was able to see where Jesus came and met that need. And that's what we have to do with people, but it's a different way of articulating it that we have to begin to follow. And I think this Awaken ministry is onto something. We'll discuss it more right after this. Stay with us for more Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, a few months ago, I did a commentary on the decision by Dan Price, the founder of Gravity Payments, to pay everyone in his company at least $70,000. You might remember that he did it because he had read that how some extra money for some people makes a big difference. Therefore, he decided to cut his $1 million salary to $70,000 and make that amount the minimum wage for the company. At the time, I predicted that it would be hard for him to attract other managers, since people with executive experience can make much more than $70,000. Since then, we have found that his decision created some other problems. 2 of his most valued employees quit because they thought it was unfair to double the pay of some new hires, while the longest-serving staff members got small or no raises at all. In fact, one of them actually helped Dan Price calculate how to raise everyone's salary to $70,000. But over time, she saw how unfair it was given that she was putting in long hours that left little time for her husband and extended family. So when she went to talk to Price, she said, "He treated me as if I was being selfish and only thinking about myself." Now, the publicity about his payment decision also generated lots of publicity and some new business. Price had to hire new people to handle that unexpected reaction and won't see the return on that investment for some time. In less than 2 weeks after the announcement, Price's older brother and Gravity co-founder filed a lawsuit that now threatens the company's existence. With the legal bills piling up and Price's paycheck being used for salary increases, he said, "We don't have a margin of error to pay those legal fees." You know, establishing a minimum wage of $70,000 in the company might have seemed like a good idea, but now Dan Price and Gravity Payments are struggling to deal with the consequences of his decision. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus documentary, now available on DVD and online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
My guest is Rob Peabody, and we are talking about reaching people for Christ. And it's certainly something that all Christians are concerned with. Some of us are afraid to bring it up with people. Sometimes we don't know if we're going to be rejected or if we're going to be able to be relevant in the life of that person. Are we really going to be able to see their need and show how they need Jesus in a way that's appealing to them? All of those things sort of play into it. And Rob and his organization Awaken provided a resource. So let me just tell you, let's talk about that before we move on to some of these cultural issues, Rob, because you can get this by going to the website of Awaken. It's awakenmovement.com, or you can just go to pointofview.net. You'll see Rob and his bio and picture, and you can click right through to the website, and you can actually order this Intersect DVD. Tell us about it, Rob.
Yeah, Intersect, exactly like you said, it's a 5-week DVD short film series, and the whole premise of it is that we are going to tell people's stories on camera, done in a really creative, innovative way, and out of that, they are going to be addressing a lot of universal human condition needs that we all have in humanity, regardless of whether we're a follower of Jesus or not. So topics such as expectations or rest or disappointment or control, and through their story, kind of their testimony, but it's not a testimony in a sense of this is how I found Jesus. It's more of this is how I've struggled with these topics that are being addressed. And there's one per session in the film series. And as they do that, the idea is that the audience that's watching, that they would be able to intersect their story with the one that they're watching on the screen. And then we gently come on at the end, and not in a preachy way at all, but in a very conversational way, we say, God has he actually has something to say about this issue of unmet expectations or disappointment in our life. Have you ever thought about it from this way? And within that, there's a study guide that helps a facilitator, or really anybody, to lead others through these topics. And the big idea of it is we really, to use a golf analogy, we want to be able to put the ball on the tee for somebody to have a spiritual conversation with anybody, but maybe with those people that might not come with us to church on a Sunday morning.
So it's either you or your colleague Chris Rogers, who come at the end of each of these segments, and you bring like a biblical character, a big Bible story, scripture to bear, but it is a very compelling, relevant way of doing it, I think. And so it's, what I guess I want to ask you is, how do you recommend using it, or are there several ways? Because when I was looking at it, I was thinking, okay, I'm just watching this whole thing at one time, and in a way this is very good because I'm seeing 5 different issues that people struggle with, and then getting sort of ideas and suggestions, or I could even take this clip and show them this particular story to help in my witnessing to them. So that's one way. What's another way?
Yeah, there's quite a few different ways. We try to make it where we assume nothing about the viewer. So a lot of resources that you come across nowadays, or the ones that I've come across, they assume that somebody knows some things about Christianity. We make assumptions. And this tries to go from the beginning. So what you alluded to earlier with the speaking that comes on afterwards by myself or Chris Rogers, we're presenting a biblical narrative or a biblical story, but yet we're trying to do it in a way that assumes that the person might not have ever heard that story before, or might not heard of that person in the Bible before. And so the ways that you can use it is, people can use it as a personal devotional tool. We've seen life groups, small groups, whatever you might call them at your church, using them in their churches, and even church-wide campaigns where they've turned it into an outreach Sunday, where they say, hey, come along and bring your non-Christian friends. I guarantee you this will not put them off. It's not going to be preachy at them, and they can show it and then break into small groups and have discussions about it. But the big idea when we were dreaming it up and praying through it was that I really was expectant that we could put this in the hands of any layperson in a church. Like, they don't have to be a professional Christian or a clergy person, but anybody in the church that could then go out and share this with their coworkers or their neighbors or people at the coffee shop, and to be able to show them and say, hey, just watch this, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. And it begins kind of a pre-Christianity discussion that ultimately is going to point them towards Christ.
It's so interesting that this is all in the UK, in London, and you come from a Texas megachurch. And I think that tells a real story, because in Texas, and that's where we're broadcasting this program, but we do broadcast all over the nation. We've got people that are in the Bible Belt and people that aren't. And it's a real divided country right now. We're on that score. And I think that, since you were here, that there's still a cultural Christianity that kind of is pervasive, although it's becoming less so in places like Dallas, Texas, where most people are assumed to go to church on Sunday. They know who Jesus Christ is. If they don't have him as their, if they don't have a personal relationship with him, they at least, most of them will acknowledge him, unless they adhere to another religion. And it's so different than many of the more liberal parts of the United States and many European countries and places like London, England. And so, in a sense, though, I look at our country and what's going on politically, and I see that there is an effort to actually strip even the cultural Christianity out. Some people think that's good because we really don't want just the surface Christianity. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's good that we are becoming more of a country where we have believers and non-believers, but we don't really have a cultural Christian consensus anymore?
Ooh, that's a tough one, isn't it?
Well, it is, because the Christian ideas sometimes are good for the society and the culture. So we fight for them, but in a sense, we also paper over the fact that perhaps people aren't really believers.
Right, and you know what? I wrote a book last year called Citizen, and I kind of addressed this in one of the later chapters and talked about the idea of the American dream or the Western dream, because over here in Western Europe, we're chasing the same things as we are in America. And when cultural Christianity comes onto the scene, we find that this idea of individualism, of consumerism, of materialism, all of those things that the secular culture is chasing, a lot of times that bleeds its way into the church and affects how we do church and how we speak of Christian community. And what I'm realizing is that a lot of times it's not the healthiest thing, because it waters down what an allegiance to Jesus actually looks like. And it's really deceptive to a lot of people who think they're okay because they're a part of the Christian subculture, but yet might not even have a relationship with Jesus. And so I'm finding that a lot of times it's not necessarily like a knowledge issue that we're finding in maybe the Bible Belt in the States, but really it's an obedience issue that we're falling into in the Western world in the way that we follow Jesus.
All right, let's go through some of these issues that people face in life, because I do think this is where we actually are able to get a conversion, if you want to call it that, or someone just all of a sudden making this move in their life where they understand who God is and that he's calling them into his kingdom. In the first one that I've noticed that you guys have addressed is the issue of rest. And I face this because we live in this busy culture where we have to accomplish things. And actually, the more we accomplish, the quote unquote better person we are, the more admired we are. And so we really are. And this one woman who was featured in the Intersect video, she had a lot of competing demands on her time, including being a mother. And I think this is, it's just a very, very common, it's a common problem that Christians face, this lack of rest. And Jesus Christ is actually, he's our rest, isn't he?
Oh, exactly. He is our one and true rest. It's that soul rest that God speaks of in Scripture. And, we found that this is a big issue. It's in London, it's all the Western world, is that we are a society of go, more, hurry, and there's just noise from society coming at us in every different direction. I read the other day that the average person checks their smartphone over 60 times a day. And so we're constantly bombarded by messages and media and news, and really we're losing the ability to even think for ourselves because all we're doing is regurgitating and rearranging other people's opinions that we read through all social media. But what I'm finding is that we talk about rest in like a way of maybe physical rest, like the idea that you could take a nap on a Sunday afternoon after church and watch golf.
This is a different kind of rest. I'm going to jump in because I asked you the question and I didn't allow enough time before the break. So we're going to continue to talk about rest. But ladies and gentlemen, during the break, let me invite you to go to pointofview.net and click through to the awakenmovement.com website, especially if you want to get a hold of the video, which I actually do recommend. And, let's just continue this discussion. In fact, if you want to weigh in or ask a question of Rob Peabody, the number's 800-351-1212. We're talking about reaching the next generation and also our neighbor. And we'll talk about it more on Point of View. Stay with us. We've got a lot more coming up.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus on DVD. Earlier this year, thousands gathered in theaters nationwide for a one-night event, the release of a new documentary, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus. The Exodus presents new scientific evidence clearly matching the biblical account. A documentary now available on DVD, featuring narration by actor Kevin Sorbo and interviews with leading archaeologists. Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, the DVD, soundtrack, and book, and available online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com. And please take action today to support passage of the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Supporters of life have momentum right now like we've rarely seen in over 40 years. Take a moment right now. Visit pointofview.net. Click on the action alert for the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Pointofview.net. We've made it easy for you. Please don't let this moment pass without taking action. Pointofview.net. Go now, pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And my guest, Rob Peabody, and you can go to pointofview.net, click through to awakenmovement.com and find out more about the organization he is involved with. He is in the UK, and he is in ministry there. He has sort of gone on a mission over to Europe, and it's a mission field, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen. Rob, we were talking about rest, and I brought up the young mother who needed rest, but really the story that you use in the Intersect video about rest has to do with this musician who, and this is just so relevant to young people because they have dreams. Each one of them has a dream. Sometimes our dreams are realized and other times they're not. But if they're realized, but there's still no, a relationship with the Lord, then there tends to be some sort of emptiness there in many, young people. And so I thought the way that, it was presented in the video, it was, in a sense, it reminded me of Jesus' parables. And, you know, that is one way we learn spiritual truth is through stories, isn't it?
Oh, completely. And that is the way that we are finding that works with this next generation. We are story-driven. And, you know, when you live in a culture where, you know, absolute truth is a debated thing, you find that it's all experience. And sure, there still is an absolute truth, but the general public is not going to give you that. And so what you find is that people's stories and their personal experience is what speaks. And so through stories like the one you're referring to here with the musician Chris, talking about rest, you know, he's talking about trying to make it big in the record industry and just going for it and putting everything at his disposal towards that. And then he never really quite realizes it. And later just finds himself completely empty, like you're saying. And it's only through, the parable that we come up at the end about Jesus talking about rest. And I love it in the Message version. I kind of quote it in the film. And we talk about, you know, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you feeling empty? And Jesus says, come away with me. He's like, I'll teach you how to really live. I'll teach you how to rest. And he talks about this unforced rhythms of grace. And it's this much bigger meta-narrative, the bigger story of God that he invites us into, and only in that can we really find the soul rest that we're searching for.
And the life. And I love how you took also the conversation into Ezekiel and the Old Testament and the Valley of Dry Bones, and how God brings the dry bones back to life. And that's what the new birth is when he breathes his life, his spiritual life, the new birth back into us. And so, I mean, when we reach the end of ourselves, whether it's the end of our dream or whether our dream just isn't fulfilling us, that is what we are really needing, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. And it's interesting that you bring that up. That old church that this was shot in, for people who haven't seen it, it's a completely abandoned, dilapidated church that once had a thriving community worshiping Jesus in it 50 years ago. It's actually across the street from my house, and so it's pretty ironic. I'm a ordained Baptist minister living across the street from this old Baptist church that's broken down, and we shot this part of the film in it because it looks like a place that's empty. It looks like a valley of dry bones, and in a symbolic way, what we're crying out for is for Jesus to bring revival through individual people and their individual stories getting caught up in his much bigger story. But then collectively, when that begins to happen, we can see revival and transformation amongst a community and then a city and then ultimately a nation. And so that's exactly what we are praying for, and we're hoping that just by creating resources of this nature, that would kind of start the conversation and point us towards that.
What do you do with people who exhibit a spiritual interest, who come to the Lord through your ministry over there? I mean, here we would probably take them to a church. We get them involved in a discipleship program, in a Bible study, and we just, befriend them and make sure they're getting fellowship and answer their questions, pray with them, and all of that. Are there places that you can take people so that their spiritual life doesn't just sort of die on the vine?
Yeah, that's exactly the hard part. Unfortunately, a lot of the churches that are existing here, you would never want to take. It sounds really harsh and judgmental, but you wouldn't want to take a new believer to them because in it they're finding just religion as usual, and they're finding a lack of joy and a lack of life that's there. And so what we have to do is when we find somebody that comes to the Lord through our ministry or that we just get put in contact with, we're inviting them into our Jesus community, so into our missional communities, and it's much more relationship-driven and community-driven, and so we invite them to come into like the normal rhythms of life that we have as a community. So come to different outreaches that we might do at the pub during the weeknights, come to a Bible study that we're having at one of the leaders' houses, but it's much more discipleship-based, and I think that is a huge change that we're beginning to see over here, because I think a large reason of why the church is in the state it is here in the UK, I think, is because of a discipleship vacuum that occurred a generation before us. And so there's been a lack of discipleship, and therefore you have people that might even grow up in church but don't even really know what it means to follow him. And so we've got to do a lot of relational discipleship, and really, it's back to the ancient future kind of faith. It's back to the way that Jesus originally set it up. It's Jesus spending time with those 12, and spending time with the 3, and then with the 72, and doing life with them, and much less of coming to our programs or coming to our events.
Do you find in this generation that there are a lot of people that just see no need for a regular worship service?
You know what? Quite a few. I mean, if they're people on the outside of the church, then they don't really understand that, and they just think
I'm talking about believers.
Weird. Okay, so if it's a believer that comes in,
I've just noticed that even here, some young people, they're Christians, they're believers, but they don't find church that relevant.
Yeah, I would say that's a common trend that we're seeing. If they've been discipled and are in that discipleship journey, they will understand the importance of meeting together as a greater community. But I think a lot of them are finding it in the less polished, less produced, less structured environment, and more of like, hey, this is a community of my friends, and we're all trying to live life according to the life and teaching of Jesus and do that together. And so I think we are finding that, and I think we need to figure out how do we reach them in a relevant way that speaks their language, so we don't just completely gloss over this generation.
Do you think the worship services need to be tailored to musically, liturgy-wise, and things like that to another generation?
I think it wouldn't hurt. I hate to, when we get talking like this sometimes, I hate to think that, this generation of the millennials is just like the most narcissistic generation that we've ever seen, and that I don't want them to think that it's all about them and what they want, and that way they're just consuming a different type of church experience than what we already have. But instead, I think there are ways that, yes, we could make church more accessible to people in this generation, and to give them roles in leadership and allow them to kind of help facilitate what that might look like. But I think, it needs, to reach a generation that is so different, I think it's going to take a lot of different ways of what church might look like. And that's what we do over here. We call them fresh expressions of church. Yeah, we really don't want to put every millennial in a box, because just like the baby boomers aren't all the same person, neither are the millennials. Sure, exactly. And you've got all different types. And what we're finding over here, we call fresh expressions of church, and it's new, we're pioneering new ways of doing church. And so we're keeping the sacraments, we're keeping the community, we're keeping the Bible as authority, we're keeping the Scripture and all of the things you would find in an Orthodox traditional church, but yet it's getting fleshed out. Maybe the form is kind of changing of what that looks like to reach a generation where they are. And I think it's really beautiful, because it's reaching people that aren't necessarily going to go to the ones that we currently have. Okay, I'm going to ask, after the break, I'm going to ask Rob a question that I think it's probably on the heart and mind of every believer, just a very personal question, and that is, why is it so difficult, just as in your Christian walk, to start a conversation with a person that we know and love, that's very close to us? It's even harder with them, I think, than it is with strangers, and to talk to them about the things that really matter in life. Why do we just, even though we know that we can see their need,
we just pull back from doing that? And how can we get over that? I know that these Intersect stories on the DVD Intersect are meant to be helpful for that, and I can see how they could be used. But I just want to go to that question with Rob, and if you've got a question for him, now's your opportunity, 800-351-1212, or if you have an idea about why it is so hard for us sometimes to speak about these things with those we love. I mean, is there a fear factor, or perhaps the idea that we might do more damage than good? Sometimes I wonder if I will, in speaking about these things to certain people. All of that. So we will discuss that here on Point of View. Again, I want to point you to the Point of View website where you can click through to awakenmovement.com and find out more about our discussion today and the video Intersect. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. We are talking about, specifically in this segment, sharing your faith. And Rob Peabody is my guest. Rob, why is it so difficult to begin these conversations about our faith with people, especially the ones that are closest to us?
Yeah, I think that is a common trend that you hear in the church, and it's a really human response, because it is hard, because those are the people that know us the best. Those are the people that are going to see us again. You know, it's easier to say something to a complete stranger that you'll never see again than one that you might have a relationship with or even be in the same household with. And I think we're afraid of being, messing it up, of not knowing enough, feeling ill-equipped, but also I think a lot of times we're afraid of being seen as a hypocrite, because in a lot of ways we all are in certain ways, and people that have a relationship with us, they can call us out on that. And so I do, however, think that this is one of the lies of the enemy that he uses into us, and a lot of us are buying into it. Because really, at the end of the day, we're the ones, if we have a relationship with somebody or they are family, we're the ones with the most influence in their life. And once we really understand our identity and who we are in Jesus, we don't have to live in fear anymore about what somebody else might think, but we can demonstrate the gospel and proclaim the gospel to them in the ways that are natural to us in everyday life with them.
Yeah, and that's why I like the Intersect videos, too, because they take each person sort of articulating their real need. They're getting down to the basics of it, and then you are able to come in and show how God meets it, and there's nothing hypocritical about that. And so, I think as we're real with people, and we do know, our family members and our friends, they know our warts. Sure. But we just have to be real. And sometimes I think in the church, I've noticed it in the Bible Belt a lot. Church is the place where you really can't be real. And we've got to change that. I don't think, in fact, I think there's an honesty about the millennial generation that doesn't buy into that. And so that's a good trend.
Exactly. I think that is something that I found this back when I was at the church in Dallas, that the next generation, they wanted authenticity. They wanted realness, warts and all. I mean, we are a generation who have seen it all. We've grown up with the internet. We've grown up with computers. We've seen all these things. And yet what we're looking for is real, authentic life. And when we can find a follower of Jesus who is real about it, warts and all, as you say, and just to live that out alongside of us, it's a beautiful thing, because they are living their story transparently, their story with God, and saying, look, you can have this as well. And I don't have all the answers. I think it's one thing we fear. We think we need to know all the answers, but there's a lot of freedom and liberty in saying, I don't know all the answers, but I do know the one who does, and I'm following him with my life. And I can tell you from my experience how life-changing this is, the life-giving and joy-filled life that only comes from Jesus. And would you like to take a part of that with me and just journey along with me?
Let's take a couple of calls for you, Rob, here. Terry is in North Carolina. Hi, Terry. Thank you. You are on with Rob Peabody.
How you doing today?
Great.
Hey, Terry.
Look, I was listening, I was a street preacher for 13 years. I walked the streets and going to crack houses and all kind of places that people consider ill repute. But I learned at those years as I was fellowship and spending time with God. You let me know that effective ministry is by the Spirit. And I want to preface this by saying I believe at the Church of Jesus Christ, we need a mighty revival in the church. We need to get rebaptized in the Spirit, because to be an effective witness is to be led by the Spirit, submitted to the Spirit. And, I recall back at that time, my brother who was not saved, I remember interceding for him nightly. And I remember one day the Lord prompted me to go and anoint the head of his bed. And that may seem strange to people, but I had been interceding for him. But the thing is, my brother, even though that the Bible does not teach sinner's perfection, that we know that the people that know us, they know us better than anybody else, and they'll see flaws in our lives. But when you got a real fellowship with God, people will really see that. They'll know that you are a child of God, that God is dwelling in you, and that has an eternal effect on people's lives. But I want to say this, I believe that what we really need in terms of reaching people effectively is a life submitted to the Spirit. And like I said, and the church needs to be baptized in the Spirit again, because only the Holy Spirit can reveal Christ to a lost soul.
Okay, Terry, thank you. We appreciate that. And, it's so true. I mean, none of this happens apart from the Holy Spirit.
Like I said, and then he is the main ingredient.
Yeah.
When people come in contact with him, I mean, it will have an eternal effect in our lives, even when reaching our loved ones who don't know Christ. It's a matter of submitting our lives, allowing the Holy Spirit to use us to live our lives before them, and as he prompts us, they will begin to talk to them about the things of God, and they'll be more effective then. When we try to do it in the flesh, oftentimes it's not effective.
Amen.
But,
thanks, Terry. Yeah. Appreciate your call. Rob, that's so true. I mean, no matter whether you call it the baptism of the Spirit, which would be more the charismatic way of looking at it, but the reliance on the Holy Spirit cuts across everybody who's a Christian.
No, completely. He was right on it there because it's got to be when the Spirit draws and woos people to Himself, and when both followers of Jesus are submitted to the Spirit, then yeah, that is when the real God action is going to happen. We are the God people. Carrying his breath and his Spirit inside of us. And so that authenticity that he was speaking of, that cuts across all different boundaries because they see a real life devoted to Jesus, and they want that because it's attractive, it's different, and it's radical. It's the way we were created to live.
Let's go to Missouri. Larry is listening on KNEO. Hi, Larry. Thanks for calling.
Hello, are you there?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, hello. I had a remark or a comment about how you started a conversation with somebody about the Lord, and I took it to prayer, and the Lord showed me, told me, just like we're speaking, He said, just ask Him how we're doing. So I wrote it down, how are you and Jesus doing? And that has won more people in Christ in the last 7-8 years that I've been using that phrase. And I have a business card out here at the truck stop here in Joplin, and it works.
Wow. Okay, Larry, thank you. So you just asked people how are you and Jesus doing?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, sounds good, Rob. What do you think?
I like you to get straight to the point.
Yeah, it really does.
I wonder, yeah.
Some people probably are, I guess you really get the people that are interested and the people that are not interested sort of right off the bat. No beating around the bush.
Sort them out pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, listen, thank you so much, Larry. I appreciate your call. And Rob, I just want to thank you too and just give you a moment again to talk about Awaken, how people can use your resources and stay in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Penna. If people would like to find out more about Awaken and our ministry, they can go to awakenmovement.com. More about Intersects, the series that we've been speaking of here for the last hour, they can go to intersectseries.com. And really, Awaken exists to inspire, to educate, and to equip the church to go be the church outside the walls of the church. And so our desire is that we would see a release and an outreaching of Jesus followers who know who they are, and then they're living it out tangibly in our communities and seeing the kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven.
Rob, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rob is in the UK, and in a sense, we can look there, we can look to Europe and see some of the things that may be on their way here. We see more of a post-Christian society. We see a lack of knowledge of the things of God. And, in some parts of America, that may not be true, but it is in some. And so I think there's a lot to learn from them and from the things that Rob is now doing, moving from the Bible Belt to the UK. And so I really appreciate their ministry. And you can find out more, again, by going to pointofview.net. Let me also encourage you to check out our donate button. It is summertime, and we certainly would appreciate any gifts that the Lord would lead you to give. And thanks for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Imagine you're in a room with 99 other people, 100 of you total. All of you listen to Point of View. You have that in common. What you don't have in common is that only one of you, actually less than 1 in 100, has ever supported the work of Point of View. That's what a recent study showed. 1 in 100. Fewer than 1% have given. 99% have not. You listen, so I know you appreciate what this program provides. Now, I invite you to move from the big group to the little one. If 1/3, 33% of those listening gives just $5 this week, we could fully fund Point of View for a year, 12 months. Not everyone will, not everyone can, but can you give $5 today, or maybe $55 or $105? Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Join the few, the thankful. Support Point of View. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day.